Surprise gone wrong. I didn't expect this reaction when I introduced him to my new AP. In my next world, I will never trust any man again. Men are so deceptive. I tried to surprise my husband with my affair after we opened our relationship, and the fool decided to divorce me instead. Hey, my name is Taylor. I'm 28 years old, and I'm married to Lincoln, a 48-year-old surgeon. Lincoln and I have been married for 2 years now. I wouldn't call my marriage with Lincoln blissful because I was unhappy all through the years of our marriage. I have always thought that I married a loving man who cared about my happiness, but the events of the past months have proved otherwise. I'm about to lose everything, and I don't even know what to do right now. People always say I married Lincoln for his money, considering the huge age gap between us, but that isn't the case. I married Lincoln for who he is and not because of his money. People always say older men are more loving, generous, and caring. I honestly found this to be true because Lincoln possesses all of these qualities. But after the wedding, I became depressed. I wanted more for my life. Lincoln is a nice guy, but the age difference between us became a problem. While I wanted to live wild, have fun, and just enjoy life to the fullest, Lincoln was reserved and conservative. Even though Lincoln was very rich, he still preferred to live a low-key life. Life with him was kind of boring, honestly. I noticed all these while we were dating, but I thought I could influence him to change as time went on. That's why I went ahead to marry him. But after the wedding, I discovered it's not easy to change anybody. I wanted to live a fly, buoyant lifestyle, which is one of the reasons I married Lincoln in the first place. Lincoln is God sent to me. He has changed my life within the few years I have known him. But the only problem I had with him is that he is boring, nothing exciting in our marriage, and even our intimacy is nothing to write home about. Other than this, Lincoln is a kind-hearted person. He makes sure I never lack anything after our wedding. He opened a jewelry store for me and also got me a car. Lincoln is ready to do anything for me. All I have to do is ask one time. He told me I was his soulmate and that he could go above and beyond for me. True to his words, he always did. He placed my retired parents on a monthly allowance, and he is currently sponsoring 2 of my siblings in school. Not just that, Lincoln also gifted my parents a beautiful car for their wedding anniversary. My parents call him the son they never had. Lincoln is so down to earth. Whenever he goes grocery shopping, he also shops for my parents. When I count my blessings, I count him multiple times. However, the lack of constant intimacy and fun in our marriage made me depressed. I couldn't afford to lose my husband, so I confided in my best friend, Anita, and she made some suggestions. So, we came up with a plan. Thinking back now, I regret everything because that was the beginning of my nightmares. On one fateful day, after Lincoln had returned from work, freshened up, and had his dinner, I told him we needed to discuss something important. I started by telling him how lonely I was in the marriage and that I wanted us to spice up our marriage. Lincoln was taken aback, but after some minutes, told me he had heard and would try and work on himself and make some changes. I told him I had some ideas on how we could spice up our marriage. He told me he was willing to try anything just to make me happy. Then boom, I told him we should try and have an open marriage. The look on Lincoln's face that day was something else. He was flabbergasted. After some time, he asked me to explain in clear terms, without mincing any words, what I meant. I categorically told him that we should try and see other people. He asked me why, and I just told him I wanted to be happy. He smiled and told me, "No problem, he is down with it as long as that makes me happy." He asked me to carry him along and let him know when I found someone. I was surprised because that wasn't the outcome I was expecting. I thought he would make a scene, but he was calm. If only I knew all that was just an act, and that deep down he was boiling with anger, I wouldn't have gone ahead with my stupid plans. That calmness was actually the calm before the storm. My best friend, Anita, introduced me to some guys. I honestly thought she was helping me and wanted to be happy. I never knew that she had ulterior motives. Anita introduced me to Stanley. Stanley was a cute and loving man, young, vibrant, energetic, and charming. Stanley and I were in the same age bracket, so we had a lot in common. Stanley and I started dating, and everything was going smoothly. I wanted to inform Lincoln about it, but my best friend, Anita, advised me against it. She told me to get to know Stanley a little bit before informing my husband about it. I wished I never listened to that devil incarnate. I followed Anita's advice and continued dating Stanley secretly because I was enjoying the flow. I also enjoyed Stanley's company. Stanley wasn't working, so I was the one footing all his bills. I even went on vacation with him to Bora Bora Island. I was the one that sponsored the trip. I lied to Lincoln that I was traveling on a business trip to go source for some jewelry. He believed me because that wouldn't be the first time I would be traveling on a business trip. The one-week getaway to Bora Bora Island with Stanley was beautiful. I enjoyed every bit of it. I also had time to unwind and be free with my lover because no one knew me there. It was after I returned from that trip that I decided to surprise Lincoln with my new affair. That day, he was all relaxed and in a good mood, so I decided to break the news to him. I told him I had good news for him and asked him to guess. He tried to guess, but he wasn't getting it, so I decided to let the cat out of the bag. First off, I refreshed his memory about how he gave his consent and blessings for me to see other people. Guess what? Lincoln told me he doesn't remember anything like that. I reminded him about how he accepted for us to have an open relationship. I went further to explain to him that I have started seeing someone, and it's been 3 months now. I wanted to be sure of the person before I surprised him with the good news. At this point, Lincoln was already fuming with anger. His face was squeezed, and I could see wrinkles all over his face. Hell broke loose when I told him about how I went on vacation with Stanley. Lincoln stood up and started making a scene. He took my phone and slammed it against the wall. Before I could make sense of everything that was happening, Lincoln gave me 3 dirty slaps on my face. My face was hot, like someone had poured boiling water on it. He told me I must be joking if I thought he would ever consent to such a ridiculous thing. He told me he had been aware of everything, but was only waiting for me to open my gutter mouth and spill. He looked me in the face and told me the marriage was over, and that I should get my belongings and leave his house while I was still trying to figure out everything. He went upstairs and started throwing out my belongings. I was shocked by how everything turned out. I reminded Lincoln how he had promised to go above and beyond for me. I called him a liar and a pretender, and he called me a gold digger. He told me I couldn't have my cake and eat it too, and that if I wanted to have an open relationship, I should do that outside of his house. He wouldn't tolerate such nonsense under his roof. He told me I would hear from his lawyers soon, and that he would divorce me so I could be free and have all the fun I wanted. At this point, it dawned on me that he was serious, so I started pleading with him to forgive me. He told me it was too late and that I should get lost. He threw everything that belonged to me out, even little things like my toothbrush and underwear. After that, Lincoln dragged me outside and told me to get lost. What should I do, guys? I need advice. I think I've used my hands to ruin my home. Please, I need suggestions on how to pacify Lincoln so he can forgive me. I will be in the comments section, so please be nice. Update? Hey, I'm back to update my story. So Lincoln threw me out that night. My things were scattered on the floor. Worst of all, Lincoln didn't allow me to take the car he bought for me. He seized my car keys and damaged my phone, so I couldn't call anyone. One of our neighbors, Ed, assisted me with her phone to book a ride. My head was hot, so I just went straight to a hotel. I wanted to think about what to do next. At the hotel, I soaked the bed with tears. The next day, I went back to the house because I thought Lincoln was calm already, but nothing prepared me for the embarrassment I got. I arrived there and met Lincoln's mom and sisters at the house. Hell broke loose when they saw me. They started hauling insults at me. Lincoln's mom called me a shameless wife. She said the reason I married her son was because of money and not because I truly loved him. She told me that I didn't only break Lincoln's heart, but hers as well, because she loved and considered me like her daughter. At that point, I couldn't hold my tears anymore. I started sobbing like a kid. I went on my knees and pleaded with them to forgive me and beg Lincoln on my behalf. Lincoln's sisters lost it and started making a scene. They dragged me out and asked me to get lost in their brother's life forever. While all this was happening, Lincoln wasn't at home, so I went outside and decided to wait for him. After a few hours of waiting under the scorching sun, Lincoln arrived. He came down from his car and asked me why I came back immediately after I saw him. I started crying and pleading, but he told me his mind was made up and nothing could change it. Just as he was still talking, he went into his car and brought out a paper. He threw the paper at me and drove inside. I picked up the paper and lo and behold, it was divorce papers. At this point, I started wailing. It felt as if my whole life had been destroyed. I left for my parents' place because I had lost all hope at this point. My parents were shocked to see me alone because I have always visited them with Lincoln since we got married. They asked about Lincoln and why I came alone, with tears in my eyes. I narrated everything to them, telling them about how Lincoln and I agreed to have an open relationship, only for him to throw me out after I went through with it. My parents told me they wouldn't judge the matter until they heard from Lincoln, because it's best to hear from both sides. My parents invited him to come over the next day, so they could at least hear his side of the story. Lincoln respects my parents a lot, so I was 50% confident that he would listen to them. He even treats my parents like his own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was just thinking and praying about everything. I don't think I have genuinely prayed for anything the way I prayed that night. I wanted a miracle so bad. I wanted my husband and my luxurious lifestyle back, because I was almost broke from staying in hotels and spending money on transportation. After what seemed like the longest night ever, it was finally morning. A few hours later, Lincoln arrived. He ignored me and proceeded to meet my parents, not even greeting them properly like he used to. My parents asked for his side of the story, and he proceeded to explain everything to them in detail. He told my parents how I cheated on him and spent his money on riffraffs. He told them how I went behind his back to Bora Bora Island on a vacation and that I lied to him, saying I was going on a business trip. To say my parents were disappointed is an understatement. The disappointment was written on their faces. My parents couldn't even utter a word. I guess they were too ashamed to speak. With their heads bowed down and in a low voice, they asked Lincoln to forgive me and forget about everything. Lincoln got irritated by their statement and flared up. He told my parents there was no chance in hell that he would ever forgive me. He told them the marriage was over. At this point, he stood up, and just as he was about to leave, he requested the keys to the car he bought for my parents for their anniversary. Everyone was shocked. The whole room was quiet. He told my parents that since he was no longer married to me, there was no need for them to keep the car. They gave him the car keys, and he called someone to come and pick it up. At that moment, it dawned on me that I didn't even know the person I married was a heartless monster. I mean, what kind of man takes back a gift he gave out willingly? Only a shameless guy can stoop that low. I never knew he was this hot-tempered, honestly. I never saw this side of him. Lincoln's selfish actions made me angry, so I signed the divorce papers. Our first hearing will be coming up soon. I will be back soon to update you guys on how everything went. Update. Hey, here's an update on my story. So, our divorce proceedings started, and Lincoln made sure I didn't get a penny. I couldn't afford a good lawyer because I was broke. That's how I lost out on everything. I didn't even get a single penny, but I didn't bother because I still had the store. While all this was going on, I kept my manager in charge of the store, and he was giving me updates about everything. After the divorce, I decided to go back to the store because that was my only hope. I arrived at the store on one fateful day, and, to my greatest surprise, I discovered Lincoln had sold off the store. I was flabbergasted when I met new faces at my store. At that moment, I proceeded to call my store manager. He categorically told me the new owners of the store laid them off after Lincoln sold the store. I asked him why he didn't inform me, and he reminded me how he tried to call me several times. I asked him to take everything honestly. I remembered he tried to call multiple times, but I always told him off because I was in the middle of a messy divorce and didn't want to add more problems to what I was facing. I asked for the store's account and was told Lincoln cleared the account. I almost fainted at that moment. My legs were shaking. Nothing else made sense to me. I never knew Lincoln was this heartless. He took everything from me. He practically ruined my life. The reason I didn't bother to hire top lawyers to help so I could get half of Lincoln's assets was because of the store. I thought I could fall back on it. Another reason I didn't fight for his properties was because I didn't want people to see me as a gold digger. If I knew he was planning on selling the store, I would have fought in court and torn his properties in half. I bitterly regret everything now. Even my family wasn't spared from his torture. Remember, I told you guys he always gave my parents a monthly allowance, but he stopped doing that. He also stopped paying my siblings' school fees. Lincoln was never a good man. He was only pretending to be a kind-hearted man. He is so petty and strong-hearted. It dawned on me that Lincoln was on a mission to ruin my life completely. I was completely broke. All the expensive jewelry he bought for me. He took everything. I decided to go confront Lincoln at the house, and I got the biggest shock of my life. I arrived at the house and met my best friend, Anita, the one who advised me to cheat on Lincoln and conceal it in my matrimonial home. Well, ex-matrimonial home. I had to clean my eyes multiple times just to make sure I was seeing clearly. With pain in my voice, I asked her what she was doing in the house when she knew I and Lincoln were no longer together. Guys, my best friend looked me in the face and told me she was in her boyfriend's house. I almost fainted at that point. It took all the strength I had in me to keep standing. She opened her dirty mouth and even called me a fool. She said I was stupid to have cheated on a man that loved me and provided for me and my family. She told me that men like Lincoln are rare. She told me how she had always envied my marriage and always eyed Lincoln. She said a lot of things to me that day. She went on and kept blabbering about how the universe worked in her favor and everything happened because she and Lincoln were destined to be together. I couldn't take any more, so I ran up and met Lincoln in the bedroom. I was shaking and crying. I asked him why he decided to hurt me this much. It hurt to know that Lincoln moved on just a month after our divorce, and not just with anyone, but with my best friend. Lincoln opened his stupid mouth and told me to stop shedding crocodile tears. He told me he didn't owe me any explanation because we were no longer married and that I didn't have the right to tell him who and who not to date. I felt betrayed. Just as we were still talking, Anita walked in and asked me to get out, that I didn't have the right to be in the room. She asked me to get out of her bedroom. I thought Lincoln would call her to order, but I was shocked when he seconded it and asked me to get out. Life is really funny. I never, in my wildest imagination, believed that a day like this would ever come, when I would get chased out of my matrimonial bedroom by another woman. Not just another woman, but my best friend, who brought this disaster on me. I told him I would not leave until I got answers to my questions. I asked Lincoln why he had decided to ruin my life by taking everything from me. He told me he vowed to take everything from me when he realized I never loved him and that I only married him for his money. He said he also promised himself that he would leave me penniless and miserable. Hearing all these things made me understand that men are evil. It dawned on me that Lincoln never really loved me, because if he did, he wouldn't be able to look me in the face and spill that trash. I cleaned my eyes and left on my way home. I kept thinking about everything. How foolish of me to have listened and followed Anita's stupid plans. I never knew she had always envied me. I felt betrayed by both Lincoln and Anita. I'm the victim in this case. So many thoughts were just running through my mind. I wanted to get to the bottom of everything, because I felt like Lincoln and Anita might have been seeing each other and might have planned the whole thing. So, I called Stanley my ex-lover. I ended things with him when I left my marriage because Stanley was broke. I was even the one paying his bills when we were dating, so I didn't want to add another liability to my problems. I ended my relationship with him. I called him that day because I felt he was also part of the plan. I pleaded with him to please share any information he knew with me. Not that I plan on confronting anyone, but for closure's sake. Stanley told me that Anita planned everything. He told me that he and Anita shared all the money I was giving him. He told me that Anita informed Lincoln about our affair when we started dating. It turns out my best friend was my husband's spy. He told me that Anita had informed Lincoln about our vacation too. Honestly, at that point I felt like a fool. I felt betrayed and became depressed. Nothing mattered to me any longer. I decided to seek help because it felt like I was going crazy. I started therapy, and honestly, that was the best decision ever. I'm still trying to let go and forgive myself for all my stupid mistakes. Nothing makes sense now, but I would smile again. My therapist made me understand that even though I was a victim, I also, in a way, broke my ex-husband's heart and trust. She asked me to give him a call and apologize for all the pain I put him through. I tried calling Lincoln several times to apologize, but he never answered my calls. I did send him a text, though, I hope he finds a place in his heart and forgives me someday. As for that fool Anita, I heard Lincoln dumped her after he was done with her. Her karma came early. She got served. She wanted everything I owned, but unfortunately for her, she could never have them. She is back to the street where she truly belongs. It's been months, but everything still seems like yesterday. The memories are still fresh. I'm currently job hunting while I stay with my parents. Every day, my parents and siblings never miss the opportunity to taunt me about how I ruined my life and their lives because of my lust and selfish desires. My siblings hate me, and they still blame and curse me till today. I hope I get a good-paying job soon so my siblings can go back to school. I'm taking each day as it comes. Looking back, I regret everything. If I could turn back the hands of time, I would have done things differently. Maybe if I had not listened to Anita, I would have still been married. Or if I had confided in my parents or siblings, just maybe things would have been different. I've always been scared of putting my drama out there for people to see because I felt ashamed. But now, I couldn't care less about that. I feel broken. I feel used. I feel like my world has just ended, and I don't know what to do. My name is Dawson, and I'm a 33-year-old man. So yeah, still pretty young, not like I'm old or anything. That my wife has to seek pleasure elsewhere. My wife's name is Veronica, and she is 32. Veronica and I have been married for about a year, but we've known each other for practically all our lives. We've been childhood sweethearts and then dated all the way from high school into college. We were the kind of couple you'd expect to spend the rest of their lives together. We have a 2-year-old who is my world. Our relationship has always been something I cherish deeply, from the days of awkward teenage crushes to the time we exchanged vows. I believe Veronica and I were meant to be, and that was why I ignored a lot of the red flags. We had our ups and downs like any other couple, but nothing ever prepared me for what happened recently. I'm sharing this because I need to get it off my chest, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there has some advice or has gone through something similar. Let me just start by saying I grew up in a very harmful and religious environment, and I never escaped my family. The church didn't believe in divorce. They preached that marriage was a sacred bond that should never be broken, no matter the circumstances. This made me feel trapped, especially when things with Veronica started to go downhill. My family thought Veronica was perfect and could do no wrong, when in fact, she did a lot of wrong. Even when I talked to them about the issues we were having, they would always spin it and put the blame on me. They would say things like, "You need to be more understanding," or "She's just stressed with the baby," completely ignoring the fact that she was treating me poorly. From a young age, I was taught that therapy was fake, a sin, and a scam. The church instilled in us that seeking help outside of prayer and religious counsel was a sign of weakness and lack of faith. I know now that's not true, but I just cannot get rid of the doctrine that has been drilled into my head for so long. This made it incredibly difficult for me to reach out for professional help or even to friends outside the church. The fear of being judged or shunned was always looming over me. I'm still scared of my parents. Their influence over me is so strong that it's hard to break free from it. Even now, I think all these factors made me blind to the red flags Veronica blatantly displayed. Her manipulation, her refusal to contribute financially, her extravagant spending, and her constant belittling of me were things I should have seen coming. But I was so conditioned to believe that my role was to endure and provide, no matter the cost to my own well-being. I paid all the bills because Veronica refused to get a job, even before we had our kid. She could never stay at a job for long, and there was always something wrong with either the job or her coworkers. After jumping from job to job, she eventually just stopped searching and refused to even consider it whenever I brought it up. She would turn it on me and even got my parents involved because she knew they would back her up, and they did every single time. They said it was my duty as a man to work and pay the bills, and that it wasn't Veronica's duty. After that, Veronica completely refused to get a job. Then she started insisting we get married. I refused because my parents didn't have the healthiest marriage. They had stayed together for the kids, and because they didn't believe in divorce, which had really worsened my view on marriage. But Veronica was persistent. Then she got pregnant. At the time, I thought it was just a birth control accident, but now I realize that she must have trapped me with the pregnancy. After that, She got my parents involved again, and they proceeded to gaslight and pressure me for about a year until I finally gave in and married her. The wedding itself was a nightmare. I could write a whole book about it. Veronica overruled all my decisions, forcing me to pay for the whole thing and still insisting on an expensive ceremony, despite the fact that she wasn't contributing a dime. She even forced me to pay for an expensive honeymoon. I had no say in anything. She dictated everything, and I was left footing the bill for it all. After the wedding, Veronica truly showed her true colors. She told me she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom because of our kid, claiming she noticed how hard I was working to cover the bills and wanted to help by being there for our child. At first, I thought it was a selfless decision on her part, but I soon realized it was all a facade. One day, while she was out, I checked her phone and found messages between her and her friends. She was mocking me, calling me stupid, and laughing about how she never intended to return to work. It was a crushing revelation. She had manipulated me into believing she was making a sacrifice for our family when, in reality, she was just looking for a way out of working. I confronted her about the messages and tried to discuss it with my parents, hoping they would see my side. But they defended her, saying she must have been stressed by me and the baby, and that's why she said those things. Veronica, of course, denied everything and turned it around on me, claiming I was invading her privacy and being paranoid. Until now, I never realized how much she had isolated me from my own family. She would twist situations and conversations to make it seem like I was the unreasonable one. She turned my own parents against me. They took her side in every argument, and I felt completely alone. Then she stopped doing her chores, despite the fact that I paid all the bills. I still split the chores and even childcare with Veronica. I didn't care that I had to be up early for work. I would still get up at night if the baby cried. I made sure to split the chores with her 50-50ths, and still, she wouldn't do her part. Whenever I talked to her about it, she would brush me off, saying her hands were full with our toddler, which I tried to understand. But the truth was I helped with childcare a lot, and she wasn't always busy with our toddler. My parents came over frequently, and they always helped with the baby, so it's not like she was overwhelmed all the time. Plus, my parents even babysat for free, which gave her plenty of opportunities to get things done. Despite all this support, she refused to contribute to the household chores. The dishes would pile up until I attended to them. The laundry remained undone until I could get them done, and the house was in a constant state of disarray until I had free time to clean and arrange. It wasn't just about the chores, though. It was about the complete lack of respect and appreciation for everything I was doing. I was working long hours to provide for our family and still coming home to take care of the baby and the household. Yet, Veronica acted like it was all my responsibility. When I tried to address the issue, she would become defensive and accuse me of not understanding how hard it was to be a stay-at-home mom. She claimed she was exhausted from taking care of our toddler all day, but I knew that wasn't the whole truth. There were plenty of times when I came home to find her on her phone, watching TV, or out with friends while my parents were watching the baby. It became clear that Veronica was taking advantage of the situation. She enjoyed the perks of being a stay-at-home mom without actually fulfilling the responsibilities that came with it. I was left to juggle work, childcare, and housework while she did as she pleased. It was frustrating and disheartening to see how little she cared about contributing to our household. I started to dread coming home, knowing that I would be met with a mess and a list of complaints from Veronica. Instead, I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, with no support from the person who was supposed to be my partner. And then she started quarreling with me more. She said I was no fun anymore and was now boring. It felt like every little thing I did annoyed her. She said I was distant, which I wasn't. She was the distant one. It was like she was rewriting our history to fit her narrative, and she would find fault in everything I did. If I left a dish in the sink, she'd blow up. If I came home 5 minutes later than expected, she'd accuse me of not caring about her and the baby. She'd scream at me over the smallest things, turning minor disagreements into full-blown arguments. It felt like I was walking on eggshells. I never knew what would set her off next. Whenever we had an argument, she would threaten me. She'd say things like, "You'll regret this," or "You'll be sorry if you don't start treating me better." It was manipulative and emotionally draining. I didn't know how to respond to her threats. I just wanted peace in our home. She started making expensive purchases without telling me. Our finances were supposed to be a shared responsibility, but she acted like my credit card was her personal bank account. One time, she ordered a $700 purse with my credit card. When I confronted her about it, she screamed at me and started accusing me of being controlling and stingy. To make matters worse, she got my parents to back her up. They said that my money was her money and that I had no right to question her purchases. It was infuriating. I felt like I had no allies, no one who understood what I was going through. She refused to discuss the purchases with me whenever I tried to bring it up. She dismissed me or changed the subject. She acted like she was entitled to spend however she wanted without any consideration for our budget or financial goals. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lack of respect and communication. These issues weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern. She was becoming increasingly controlling and abusive. Her behavior was pushing me further away, and no matter how hard I tried to fix things, it never seemed to be enough. I wanted to make our marriage work, but it was becoming impossible. The constant fighting, the threats, the financial irresponsibility, it was all too much. I was losing hope and didn't know how much longer I could hold on. I should have left sooner, but I was scared, not just for me, but for the baby too. She also started to nitpick on everything, the sex, the intimacy. She saw everything as a problem. She complained that we weren't having sex enough and that I was too much of a softie, mind you. We were having sex about 3 or 4 times a week, but it still wasn't enough for her. She would constantly bring up how I wasn't satisfying her needs, and it felt like nothing I did was ever good enough. I was trying my best to keep her happy, but it seemed like the goalpost kept moving. Then, she started becoming really secretive with her phone. She demanded that I share my location with her, but refused to share hers with me. My parents backed her up, saying she was basically home all day as a stay-at-home parent while I worked. They argued that she needed to know where I was in case of an emergency and that I should trust her, since she was with the baby all the time. I relented and shared my location, but she didn't share hers. She would randomly accuse me of cheating, despite the fact that she was being so weird and secretive. It was like she was projecting her guilt onto me, trying to make me the bad guy. She changed her phone password and was always smiling at her screen. Mind you, that's fine on its own, but it's the way she was so secretive about it that raised red flags. She'd be texting someone, and when I'd ask who it was, she'd just say it was a friend and quickly put her phone away. It wasn't just her secrecy that bothered me. It was the sudden shift in her behavior. She stopped being affectionate and started finding excuses to avoid spending time together. She'd go out shopping or running errands for hours, and when I'd ask about her day, she'd give vague answers. I felt more like a stranger in my own home. I tried to talk to her about it, but every conversation turned into an argument. She'd accuse me of being paranoid or controlling, and it always ended with her storming off. I felt confused and hurt. I wanted to believe her, to trust that she was just going through a phase, but the signs were hard to ignore. It wasn't just about the lack of sex or the constant nitpicking. It was about the erosion of trust and connection. I was losing my wife, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Little did I know that my wife was cheating on me big time. She was using me, even manipulating my parents. Yesterday, I finished work much later than usual. I texted my wife to say I might work overnight, but then I didn't need to stay overnight. I wanted to text her and tell her, but changed my mind. Instead, I planned a surprise takeout and a mini date at home. Lately, things have been tense between us, and I hoped this would help us reconnect. Our son was staying at my parents' place, which is also something we'd argued about recently, but didn't seem important now. When I got home and knocked on the door, a shirtless, drunk guy opened it. He looked confused, then shocked to see me. That's when it hit me. My wife had been cheating. The guy just stupidly stood there, unsure what to do, frozen in place. I rushed upstairs, hoping for an explanation from my wife, only to find her fast asleep in bed. I was confused and hurt. I hurried back downstairs, but the guy had already left. The shock hit me hard, betrayal, anger, disbelief. It all rushed through my mind. How long had this been happening? Who was this guy? Why would my wife do this? I felt furious and heartbroken. I was livid and hurt. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to wake her up and demand answers, but I couldn't stand the sight of her. Fueled by anger and betrayal, I grabbed some clothes and got out of there while she was still asleep. I drove straight to my parents' place, where they were surprised to see me and instantly knew something was wrong. I didn't feel like talking, so I just checked on our sleeping kid, then crashed in my old room. This morning, my phone won't stop buzzing with calls and texts from my wife. I'm avoiding picking up because I don't know what to say to her. I'm guessing she already knows what's up, especially if she's been in touch with that drunk guy from last night. So here I am, trying to distract myself, just trying to make sense of it all. Update, it's been a few days. I apologize, things have been pretty tough. I really appreciate the support, it has been so helpful. When I made this post, it was just a rant. I genuinely was not expecting the amount of traffic it got. Now let's just hope this doesn't somehow find its way to my wife. Or should I say my ex-wife? LOL. I'm going to try and answer a few frequent questions that I saw before moving on to the update. What was the fight I had with my wife about? It was about our baby's sleepover at my parents' place. As I mentioned before, that isn't really important for context, but basically I thought and still think our baby is too young for sleepovers with my parents. He's just 2, but my wife disagreed. She said she needs breaks every now and then. She gets lots of breaks, and I always relieve her of the baby when I come back from work. She also knew how I felt about my parents and that I didn't want my kid growing up very close to them because of their doctrines. But because my parents always picked her side, she disagreed with me on that too. Who was the drunk guy at our house? I don't know him, but I have now confirmed that my wife was indeed sleeping with him. Will I be getting a divorce? Yes, cheating was the final nail in the coffin. Do I have a lawyer? Yes, he's a close friend, and I will be reaching out to him. Those are basically the most frequent questions I noticed. I haven't updated sooner because work and coming to terms with things are kind of tough for me. I have talked to my boss, and she was very empathetic, saying she would give me a break if I wanted. I rejected it, though, as I think I would go crazy. The only thing keeping me sane now is the baby at work. As for actual updates, I'm sorry to say not much has happened. Like I said, my wife started bombarding me with calls a lot. And at some point, she called my parents. I don't know what she told them, but my parents came into my room and started berating me. I finally had to explain to them what happened, and then they finally relaxed. They said that wasn't what my wife had told them, but they also refused to tell me what she had said. My parents then left to call my wife, and after a while, they came back and told me that I would have to try and forgive her, as divorce is not an option, and that she was genuinely sorry. I told them to leave my room because I needed time to think. They obeyed and left, and that was when I finally called my wife and told her that I was done and she had to be cheating on me. We had a long conversation, which I'm obviously not going to reiterate word for word, but basically she admitted to cheating on me with that guy. She said they had gotten drunk and she apologized for it. That's when I told her there was no need because I wanted a divorce. She freaked out, hung up on me, and immediately called my parents, who came back to the room to tell me divorce was a sin. I told them to leave me alone, and I've been ignoring them for the past couple of days. I've been ignoring my wife's calls and ignoring my parents too. Thankfully, my wife hasn't tried to come and take the baby. I've been spending every free moment I have with him. Thanks for reading, and thank you to all those who checked up on me and direct messaged me. I really appreciate it. I couldn't reply to all the messages because there are a lot, but rest assured, I'll read them all. Update. Thank you all for the positive comments. They keep on coming, and it really means a lot. I haven't updated in a while, and I apologize for that, but I finally have an update now. You guys have been messaging me requesting an update, and I appreciate the concern. It's been a few weeks, about 2 weeks, since my last update, and things have been wild. First of all, when my parents realized I was dead serious about the divorce, they kind of panicked. They kept giving me sermons about how it was a sin and that I would go to hell. Honestly, that made something in me snap. I exploded on my parents. I told them they needed to stop trying to dictate my life and that I was an adult, not some kid. I told them I was not only getting a divorce, but I was also done with the church. I told them I wouldn't be attending anymore because it was a horrible and judgmental place. My parents freaked out, and the next day, when I came back from work, I came home to an intervention. My parents had invited the pastor, some church members, and my wife. I didn't want to seem crazy. I knew how they could spin stories. So I sat down with them, talked, and calmly explained my reasons. When I saw they wouldn't see reason, I took the baby and left the house. It was great. I took the baby to get ice cream, and we just walked around for a bit. Mainly I carried him, but I didn't mind. I got back home hours later, and they had all left except my parents. But I knew I would never be at peace, so I told my parents that I was moving out. They freaked out and tried to convince me not to, but I refused to listen. I'll be moving in with a friend soon, and I feel happy about it. I'll also be meeting up with my lawyer friends soon, as they were out of town and have only just returned. That's it for now. I'll update when I have more to share. Thanks again for all the support. Update. Hey, it's me again. I promised to update once I had more to share. So here we go. It's only been a week since my last update, but a lot has happened. First of all, I've moved out, like I said I would. My parents, at some point, thought I was joking since I didn't move out instantly. They were shocked when I finally did. They called me a lot of things and tried to gaslight and manipulate me, but this time I didn't listen. They even tried to refuse to let me leave with the baby, but I just told them I would call the police. Now I'm at my friend's place, and I feel better and at peace. I also met up with my lawyer friend, and it went great. Let me fill you guys in. I own the house where my wife is currently staying. I just haven't had the strength to kick her out yet, but my lawyer will be handling that now, thankfully. Since I already own the house before I married my wife, it can't be considered a marital asset and is mine solely. The house was a gift from my grandfather. Also, since we live in a state where once you cheat, you automatically give up custody, I have good chances of getting the baby, which is the one thing I'm really ready to fight for. This legal edge has been a huge relief, and it gives me hope that I can secure a stable environment for my child. In terms of my relationship with my parents, it's been a roller coaster. They were devastated and angry when I moved out. They bombarded me with calls and messages, trying to guilt-trip me into returning and patching things up with my wife. But I stood my ground. I made it clear that their manipulation tactics wouldn't work on me anymore. They even attempted to involve other family members and friends to pressure me, but I explained my side to everyone, and most of them understood and supported my decision. I told the ones that didn't to go kick rocks. Living with my friend has been a breath of fresh air. I'm finally away from the toxic environment and constant scrutiny. My friend has been incredibly supportive, offering a listening ear and helping out with the baby. We've been settling into a new routine, and for the first time in a long while, I feel very hopeful about the future. I've also started seeking professional help to deal with everything. Despite my upbringing, I decided to see a therapist. I'm still on the wait list, so I can't say much on this yet. As for my wife, she's still trying to reach out, sending messages and calling nonstop. She's apologized profusely, claiming she made a mistake and wants to work things out. But I've made it clear that there's no going back. The trust is broken, and I can't subject myself or our child to that kind of instability. I'm taking things one step at a time, focusing on creating a better life for me and my child. There's still a long road ahead, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next. Thank you all for your continued support and kind words. They've meant the world to me during this tough time. I'll keep you posted with any new updates. It's been a while, months to be precise. I apologize for not updating in such a long time. Life got busy, and I kind of forgot. I owe you guys an update, and I apologize for not giving it sooner. First of all, the divorce has been finalized, and I am now in low contact with my parents and my ex. There isn't really much to talk about the court proceedings. It was a quick battle, thankfully. She had cheated, and the laws are the laws. She lost custody, and she actually caused a ruckus in court because of that. She didn't get anything, not alimony, not even anything from the house. We had only been married for a year, so we didn't have any debts to split. Everyone just kind of separated our finances and went our own ways. I got custody, and she got visitation rights, which was the best thing. She still tried to approach me and fix things outside the courthouse, but I just ignored her and told her never to contact me unless it was about the baby. And that's it. I also got a raise at work, which means more money for me, but also longer hours. I do juggle everything well, though. I still spend a lot of time with the baby and sometimes even take him with me to work. He only has a little while until he starts preschool. Remember in my last post, I mentioned that my lawyer would be helping me kick out Veronica. At first, she refused to leave as she had nowhere to go, but eventually, she got evicted. I moved back into the house because, even though it had bad memories, it was the closest to work and had a shorter commute than my friend's house. And that's my life now. I don't talk to my ex much, unless it's about the kid, and I also rarely talk to my parents. I no longer go to church, and I am in such a happy place. I'm also in therapy, which has been so helpful. Thank you guys so much. Your comments meant so much to me and helped me when I was in such a dark place. I will forever appreciate it, and I hope no one else goes through such a situation. Life is a lot better now. I've found peace and happiness, and I'm focusing on creating a positive environment for my child.